Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar series titled Using Lean Six Sigma Black Belt Skills Outside of Lean Six Sigma Projects. Today is our first session in this 8-part series, and we are covering strategic planning. And today's webinar will be led by Rick Haynes, who is a 19-year Lean and Six Sigma practitioner and one of Smarter Solutions' senior instructors. Through his career, he has certified as a Master Black Belt Champion, and a Yellow Belt, along with teaching and certifying professionals in all the Lean Six Sigma areas. His personal Lean Six Sigma work has spanned nearly all business types, manufacturing, transactional, along with a research and development business. He is a master degree statistician and has taught statistics in the Penn State University system. He has worked in all levels of business from the entry level up to a site engineering manager. His life experiences and skills will provide you with a great deal of knowledge today as we cover the subject of strategic planning. I want to cover a few of the housekeeping items before I turn it over to Rick. And I want to let you know that today we have scheduled 1 hour for the session. If we have a lot of questions, that could go over the allotted 1 hour, but we will wrap up the content by 3 o'clock Central. We have muted all of the participants, so we cannot hear you, but we really encourage you to ask questions throughout the session, and then again at the end, if you have anything that has not been answered, you can enter your questions through the GoToWebinar system, and we will be tracking those as we go along. We are recording today's webinar in case there are some that missed it, but also for you guys that are live, you can watch the recording for the next 14 days, and we will send you an email out with access to the recording, and you will receive that in the next 24 to 48 hours. Someone may also be following up with you in regard to today's webinar just to get some feedback so that we can better address your needs in the remainder of the series. If for any reason you do not want to be contacted, just let us know at the end of the exit survey that you will receive when the webinar has completed. I will now turn the webinar over to Rick, who will get started, and thank you for joining us.
Hello, everybody. This is Rick. I appreciate you participating. As Mallory talked about, there will be an exit survey, but during the middle of this webinar, there will be questions and polls that will be taken just to keep this a bit interactive and to keep you entertained. So please participate. And if you didn't understand, in the GoToMeeting icon, it's generally on the upper right of your screen, you'll have a place that you can enter questions and stuff. Please do it at any time. I have Mallory here to record them, and if I will answer them as they come up, if they're appropriate, or reach them all at the end. Now, what is Smarter Solutions? That's the company I work for and that I represent here giving this webinar. It's it started out as a Lean Six Sigma consulting firm. It's moved a little beyond that. Now Lean Six Sigma training is what we do for training, but it's really, we're finding that Lean Six Sigma isn't the end-all program anymore. It's really one of the enablers for business improvement. And that's one of the reasons this webinar series came about. We call our system Integrated Enterprise Excellence because we're trying to remove the Lean Six Sigma stigma and talk about this really is part of the whole business system. If you're interested, we'll talk about, there's some books that we'll have at the end, you'll see. This topic today and the whole series, basically, the 8 lessons, will be out of Forrest Breifogel's book, Integrated Enterprise Excellence, Volume 2, which is business deployment. It talks about what we call the Enterprise DMAIC, or EDMAIC. It's really using the concepts of the DMAIC and Lean Six Sigma business improvement model at the enterprise level. So if you're a Lean Six Sigma practitioner, it makes a lot of sense, and it fits in well of how you can use these tools outside of doing projects. There are also references to his 3rd volume, which is really the project book. It talks about doing Lean Six Sigma projects. They'll be out throughout the lecture. Now, to break into this is the first session of our series of 8. And this was spurred on by a conference. I went to the ASQ World Conference in St. Louis this year. Lots of attendance for innovations with Lean Six Sigma tools and the usage of the tools outside of projects. It seems most of us got very good skills on running projects, but being a black belt is not a career path for the rest of your working life. So the question is, what comes next? So this series was put together to help address some of those questions, because you may already know some of this stuff. Maybe this will just fit it together. But for a lot of black belts that have spent their improvement career looking downward at the processes and they never turned around and looked upward, some of this might be enlightening, and that's what we're trying to do. Today's is on strategic planning, making strategies, but you can see the other topics we'll go through. They were chosen through the office here. We made a discussion of what will people do after their black belt career is over. Now, this applies to master black belts and green belts at some level, but we're just going to call them black belts right now, or practitioners leaving it, their position. Hope you enjoy them. First question here to help me understand what I'm going to talk about is, why did you choose to attend this seminar? Assuming you're the one who signed up, please put what of these 4 choices best fits your reason for attending this webinar. Now you should have a little screen pop up that you just select it with your mouse and it'll pop up. It looks like we're split. Nobody for continuing education yet, but we're split between interest and opportunities for advancement. Oh, they're coming in. All right. We'll give it about 10 seconds more, and we'll wrap it up here. So you get one last shot here. All right, everybody. Thank you. You should post it on your screen to see here in a second. It looks to be that the biggest one is business improvement ideas. Well, that's excellent. That means a lot of people are thinking about what they can do to help their organization. I guess that leads to continued employment. Looking to advance your personal skill levels. Well, that's key to staying employed in general. Now, I think all of these 4 were good choices, but I appreciate it, so I'll focus a little bit on the enterprise stuff today. Thank you for that. So here's the learning objectives for today's session. How to use DMAIC and look at the problem statement in relation to a strategy in your organization. List the DMAIC tools that can be used to improve strategic planning, and we will talk a little bit about traditional strategic planning. And we'll demonstrate an importance of linking strategies to production or performance metrics. First of all, what is strategic planning, and what might you see? Now, I assume most black belts never have been involved in this operation. Across the people who work with me here and in other places, the majority of them never get this chance. Hard to say why, but I think a lot of it they didn't ask. I have been lucky enough to be in 2 corporate strategic planning sessions, and that really drives a lot of this lecture. But I started with Wikipedia. I mean, Wikipedia may not be the best reference, but it is a good start for most topics. And it says strategic planning is as follows. You did a vision, find out your mission and vision, your goals, and really set the plan. Do a SWOT, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So it is, can you make it? Formulate a plan, implement your plan, and put controls in place to keep it. Sounds wonderful. It's not a plan I've ever used, but it does sound like a very common task. What I've seen as traditional strategic planning is generally the leadership reviews past performance, generally the fiscal year, or what's completed of the current fiscal year, determine what was unacceptable or what they wanted to do better. They create a new strategy for the next fiscal year, and what's key is they do it basically fiscal years. I would expect your organizations, like all the ones that I've been at, do strategic planning yearly, generally through collecting ideas of the leadership team, whether those are the C-levels or the upper management or presidents, vice presidents, not sure. Then they prioritize them, make a short list, pick the ones they want, fill out a little more meat to each strategy, and assign people to work on it. Now, again, you may never have seen this process work in your organization. We would hope they're using traditional tools to do it. Affinity diagrams, brainstorming to collect ideas, and then good prioritization tools so they are selecting strategies they're prioritizing the strategies, the ones that will really benefit business performance. So as I put in here with a little bit of cynicism, hopefully they have a prioritization matrix, ranking them based on business needs. They generally have arguing and horse trading and more arguing. That's what I've seen in most of them. But in the end, the bottom statement is the one that probably bothers me the most, and it happened at the ones I've been to. The senior people get their way. At some level, CEOs are brought in for coming up with new directions and new strategies, and you just do it. So with all the effort, a lot of strategies are just the senior people's opinions on what they want to go do. Now, what would come next? Generally, this group would decide what the strategy is going to be, what it's going to entail, if it needs a budget, and then they pick somebody to lead it, whether they call it a strategic planning manager or a project manager or coordinator, but someone who is relatively senior is put in charge. It is their job to make the strategy come to pass. They decide what they want. They can bring in people, get a budget, whatever, but that's how it works. Now, I am still cynical on it because in my view, it doesn't always work. And we'll talk about some of the weak spots as we go through this session, along with some of the other topics in the series. Now, if you haven't seen that, you should have been able to see in your time in your organization the benefits of strategies. When I work with companies and individuals, a question that comes up is, did the strategy change your performance of your organization? That's key because it's organizational performance is why strategies should be developed. The next one, did they change how the decisions were made? When the organization is making decisions for their future, what are we going to do? Are we going to deal with this customer, that customer? Do they consider the strategies in place in making their decisions? So all decisions support the strategic plan. And the last one, which to me still amazes me, at some period, do they judge a strategy as a success or a failure, or do they just quit talking about them? And most of my experience is companies just quit talking about them. They disappear from existence while they make a new one or renew an old one. But it's not treated like you would a DMAIC project where at some point you declare success or failure, or that you need to recharter the team or the project. They just disappear. It makes me wonder. Now, if Forrest Stoner was here, and it wasn't said earlier, but this series will be given in a mixture of lectures from me and Forrest Breifogel. He would say one of the problems with new CEOs is they all set strategies that are people-dependent, not organizational-dependent. Again, that's why some of them just disappear, because our beliefs change, so we change the strategies. So this comes up with the polling question number 2. I'd like to know what you have seen in your strategies or strategic plan for your organization. Now, pick all the ones that apply. There's 5 choices here. The bottom one means that if you're in a process improvement practitioner, that your project selection came from people examining the strategies and using the strategies to determine what the projects will be, so they're all supporting. So please enter what you got. Now you get, again, multiple choices. It's not one. Because it's interesting to me how much people take their metrics, link them to strategies, and really have a clear use of the strategies to drive behavior and performance. Well, thank you for answering. We're getting a lot of good answers here. Integrated in the performance measurement system around scorecards is coming up to be popular, and SMART goals. That's great. We'll give you about 5 more seconds here. All right, thank you, everybody. It looks like the second and third one, having SMART goals and integrated performance measures, are the 2 key ones. Well, that's great. What's interesting is the bottom one. Less than 1/4 of the people say they're using the strategies to help pick improvement project ideas. Think about that one. Isn't that odd? If it really is a strategic plan, why aren't we using it to drive our projects? So there's one link you can do to help put together. So back to our talk. Why should a black belt, and again, I'm using black belt in the sense of any process improvement practitioner, Lean Six Sigma practitioner, why should they be involved in the strategic planning process? Well, if you think about it, we are all skilled in leading these types of meetings where you've got an ideal but nothing put to paper yet. That's the measure phase for a lot of us in our training. We're experienced with working people at all levels of seniority. All of you must have had teams with people quite senior and quite junior to you on a team, and you learn to deal with respect that the power level or the influence isn't the big driver. We can all work with it. And the third one I always come to, we're able to succeed when you have no authority. If you've worked most of your projects like most of mine, you walk in there as an outsider, you cannot make anybody do anything. So you've gained soft skills to lead people, because really black belts are leaders, they're not managers. And the last one is we're relatively objective to the power struggles. You really don't have a, quote, dog in the fight when you sit in one of these strategy meetings or strategic planning meetings. All you want to do is get to an answer everybody believes in, and it helps you lead. I would expect your leadership in your organization brings in facilitators for some of these. In most places, they come from human resources, or they bring an outside consultant in. They seem to forget there's a lot of really strong resources in their Lean Six Sigma programs that could do that, and that's what we're going to be talking about here. And by the way, at the end of this talk, we'll be discussing how you can try to get yourself involved. All right. But if you can see the note here at the bottom, how do you get involved? Well, you sort of have to just ask your way in. Now, why should we be involved? Well, we've got a lot of tools that put rigor behind all of the planning, because you think about it, strategic plan starts with a problem, builds a case, starts collecting data, starts making improvements and changes to drive a behavior. FMEA is a great tool for risk assessment, even a risk assessment of what happens if the strategy doesn't work. SWOT analysis. Now, not all programs talk about that as part of your training, but it's a real quick view at the situation you're working within. Again, it's a four-quadrant plot that you list your strengths and your weaknesses in that area, and then the opportunities available and threats that might get in your way, and it helps you focus your efforts. And problem statements. All the work we do on projects to document an excellent problem statement, because you know whoever defines the problem solves the problem. So a lot of that's how we do that. Those terms, and we'll talk about it here in a few minutes, about how that's key into putting strategies together. And the last one's translating the plan into action. If you could not do that, you would not be successful in your Lean Six Sigma role, and you wouldn't be listening to this webinar. You can take a problem statement, turn it into a project, solve it, and put controls into place. I mean, this really is the forte of Lean Six Sigma practitioners. Now, the other one's performance measures. We all went through a lot of training about metrics, control charts, capability analysis, measurement studies, good measures, bad measures. You must have had a project that started out with a project measure that was useless and you had to go do something else. Well, black belts are very versed in this, and it comes real simple to us, and we can talk about how are you going to measure success. What will be the goal of this strategy? And then we get to the SMART concept, which most of you flagged earlier. But do we have a goal that's specific, measurable, actionable, reasonable, and time-based? Now, you may have another 5-word acronym for SMART, but those are some common ones. But look what gets in there. Measurable. I don't know how many strategies I see that aren't measurable. They're just go do something. They're more of an implementation plan than an improvement plan. Now, how would you determine if a strategy truly worked? Well, if you did the early part right, you've got a metric that you were trying to drive with that strategy, and you can test for impact. Now, we've seen that, right? That's hypothesis testing. T-test, two-proportion test, chi-squared test, probably not regression, but more the comparison testing. Now, what's neat is we have the tools to look at it like any potential cause in a project and say that effort isn't working. There is no impact. We need to stop that effort, redistribute resources on something else because we want the strategy to succeed. Well, we can find an effort that's showing progress, made a significant improvement. We can emphasize it, put more resources on it. The neatest thing about this whole concept of judging does it work is you can declare success on a strategy before the fiscal year ends. Free up the resources, do something else, pick a new strategy, release them to other work or whatever, but you don't keep it dragging on and having meetings when you're either done or you should stop. Think about how good it would be to know. Now, how does all this stuff relate to our DMAIC tool set? Is a strategy like a problem statement? Now, I pulled out of our black belt course, what's a problem problem statement characteristic. It's got a well-defined project metric. It links to customer requirements and goals. There's a quantifiable impact based on data. You've got a data source that you can measure performance with. And the bottom one, no stated or predetermined solution. Now, that's to avoid the problem statement that's really a implementation plan disguised, the lack of an implementation plan disguised as a problem. The question, could these apply to strategies? And of course they would. Everything should be in there for a strategy, but they're not exactly the same. Strategies are more than a problem statement. They should define the problem, but they usually go a bit further of giving guidance on where to go with the problem and how to fix it. Now, some strategies are gone a little bit too far, and they actually have exactly what you're supposed to do, and it becomes an implementation plan. But in general, they should give you some guidance on what to do. Now, I propose if you take a lot of our strategies and pull them back and make them more like a problem statement, the strategic effort would probably work out better. Because in black belt projects or in the DMAIC, the team somewhat determines the direction to address the problem with. It's not the writer of the problem statement. Now, I admit some do, but they leave the practitioner ability to go follow the data wherever it needs to be. In strategic planning, generally the leadership in an off-site meeting, usually associated with golf, will not only pick the problem, but decide you how to go do it. So they say, here's what you're going to do. We're going to do A, B, C, and D. Let's assign a manager to each. Aren't we happy? We told them what to do. They will call us when they're done. I can't wait to our next planning session. So I think you need a better balance here. I think strategies should not be too descriptive, but they should more clearly define, like a problem statement does, the problem and how it's measured and what direction it needs to go. Now, what other tools could be used? And I'm going to talk through these here in the next couple slides. Ones that are traditionally not used. In my strategic planning efforts, we've used affinity diagrams and brainstorming and prioritization matrices and the force field diagram. Now, FMEAs should have been used in some cases. They didn't want it. And logic trees, they didn't want to hear about it, but we ended up driving the brainstorming at some level following those. So these are techniques that can actually make it more successful in doing your planning effort. So let's walk through these. Now, I'm assuming all of you have heard of most of these. We'll talk about affinity diagrams. To me, this is one of the great tools for that level of staff. It's when you're trying to get a lot of people with diverse opinions to get them to focus on a handful of areas. Generally how they work, you would give everybody a Post-it notepad, and I know my slide here says on a wall, but I found a lot of them don't stick as well as they should, so I usually like to use a table and have them write down 10 or 12 problems or things that we need strategies to address, lay them out on the wall or the table. Once they're all out there, everybody note without talking matches Post-it notes that have similar topics, or they have an affinity for each other, so you stick them together. And what you do is, without any noise, maybe a little music in the background, walk around and let these notes agglomerate or group together until you have 3 to 5 groups. Now, at this point, you stop, break up your teams or your people, a little bit on each group, and have them write a title of what they all have in common and a paragraph to talk about the body of what needs to be worked on. This can be a great starting place to get focus on where do we need to go to improve the business, which is what strategies are made for. An example here on the screen is one we talked about in our Black Belt classes about what if you did an affinity diagram on how to start a Lean Six Sigma program in your company. Now, if you listed all the things that matter, you got all your practitioners together, you could come up with these lists. Now, this is short, with 4 groups: infrastructure issues, project execution issues, training issues, and cultural stuff. Now, there are lots of more things to be involved, but they probably fall in these groups, and you could divide up the efforts that way. And that's the similar groupings is what you might target a strategy after. And again, there's a lot of this in the Volume 3 textbook that we referred to earlier. Force field analysis. I think this is one of those 7 quality tools that they talked about, the advanced management quality tools. But it's really a wonderful tool when you find that there's just general disagreement or people resist going forward and you don't quite understand why. And it's as simple as this picture is. You put your chart pad on there, use a whiteboard, and write down, we have to solve this problem, whether it's profit, sales, or whatever's your organization. What things are driving us to success and what things are restraining us from success, and you list them. Things that are going to push you to succeed and things that will hold you back. The next step, though, is take the restraining forces, come up with a plan how to mitigate them, minimize them, reduce their impact, or whatever. So you're trying to make a case that we can do something to manage those, but also the ones that are the driving forces. You want to do how to accentuate them, how to take advantage of them, how to leverage them to do more. But what you're really doing is talking really about the sandbox you're playing in to make it more successful. I do find in the project sense, when I have projects working in areas that people are very difficult to work with, almost all the actions with restraining forces do with better communication. Surprisingly enough, for strategies, that is also the same thing. Things that hold us back are fear. Communication works that. Don't have enough time. Communication works that. All of this, communications work. So generally, that's where a lot of our actions come from. Last one's a logic tree here. One of my favorite tools in these type of events, I've had more success using it below the executive level for strategic planning at division and department levels. But you start off with listing your problem on the left-hand side. I'm not making enough sales, not making enough money. And you do the logic. What to make more money, what can drive it? And you list them, and that's the next tier on the tree. A lot of people write these more vertical. I like them left to right just because they fit better on most of our screens. And it becomes a logical progression of things you can do to adjust your or fix your problem. Strategies are generally the first list that you get to. I think with my little screen here I show that. This one's really a project-based one. But generally your strategies come right here, the next tier below your problem. Now what you do with the strategies would be the next tier to the right. Now, we talked about a lot of stuff at tools, but what else is about fixing them to metrics? We believe, Smarter Solutions, the strategies are really intended to be a guide for the organization to lead to greater success and performance. That's the reason they're written. Which leads me to the question is, how does an organization therefore track the progress of accomplishing their strategy? Do they track completion of the action plan, or do they track the impact on performance? In my view of the consulting that I've done with Smarter Solutions and my work experience before that, almost all strategic plans are tracked using completion to their action plan. Obviously, though, the second one is truly the only one that matters. I can expect your leadership would much rather get the performance, and who cares if I finished my plan, as long as I get the gains. Now the big question would come, though. You realize to track performance, you must link performance to your strategies. So how do you do that? So which would come first, strategies or performance metrics? Now, depending on where you go to get your information or what you read, it can come anywhere. By the way, I look over, no one has submitted a question yet. I am hoping that it's because you're just engaged and listening, and I'm covering the topic so well that you have no questions, but I also don't believe that. Please put them in. It really does help the whole content and the performance of my lecture, and if I get some questions. Let's go back to this topic, which is first, strategies or metrics. Now, if you read the most commonly known book out there for corporate strategic planning, it's about the balanced scorecard, based on a paper written by Kaplan and Norton, must have been about 8 years ago. They've written a series of books on it because it was a theory at that point, and they're trying to make it real. Now, all they did is pulled in a lot of they put strategy maps and all this, and a bunch of things they put in there to do that, but they're not any different than the stuff we used in projects. But they do say, do your mission, your vision, now set your strategies to meet your mission, then create metrics that will support the accomplishment of your strategies. But does that seem right? They haven't set a metric of performance before they set their strategy. If we think back to an earlier slide, strategies should be evaluated for the impact on performance. I said that's number one. So how can you select a strategy without any performance to measure? It reminds me of some of the very worst Lean Six Sigma projects I've had in my whole life, that the problem statement was, Rick, make this better. What do you do? How do you define better? And what's the answer you may get? I'll tell you when we get it, because I'll know. See, I hate those projects, but I think a lot of our strategies are built the same way. Make it better. I'll know when you get there. Now, this is a dilemma our company sees as the biggest part of organizations and their strategies. And some of the reasons why business improvement strategies that involve Lean Six Sigma don't last in many companies, because they did not put a performance measure. I am doing something in order to change this high-level performance, because if I don't change it, why am I spending the money? So let's talk about linking them. Let's say your strategy is increase sales to the European market segment, because I'm mostly North American right now, let's say. What might you select as metrics? You guys, I like type in a couple metrics you might have to support this topic. I've got 3 down there that you might see. Percent of sales hours spent in that European segment with a goal of an increased 2x. More sales in that area. More customers in that area. Now, what other ones could come up? Now, they all sound pretty good, though. I assume you could see them here and there. On-time completion of the milestones for my strategy. There might be one. Am I getting things done in time? But what's really missing from this list? What's missing is the overall impact. I'm going to go back a slide. But if your goal is to increase the sales, why wouldn't you have sales as your primary purpose of your whole strategy? Who cares how many hours they spend? Who cares how many sales go or how many customers? You could do really good on all 3 of those and not increase sales. If anything, in the worst case, you could drive corporate sales down overall because you spent too much time on this European stuff and forgot your current customers. So really, I would say overall sales is the only metric that matters. The rest of them are just, I guess in my project world, I call them butt-in-the-seat metrics. They're just measuring activity, not output. And now this is off the topic, and we'll get into a later seminar topic, one of the later ones. But when you measure activity and not performance, it's easy to game them and look good and not make a benefit to the organization. So avoid measuring activity. You should be measuring results. Now, all of those last metrics, those 3 can all be met, and you can still have problems in your organization. Like I said, you spend so much time meeting those goals, you let your current customer slide lose big business, and you can actually take a net loss. And this is one of the big issues we have with strategies and metrics. So pick your metrics. Strategies you build to change a known performance metric that's not meeting your needs. So here's the last question I'm going to ask. There'll be an exit one. Given all the discussion we had on strategies, you may be looking at them differently. How successful are the current years or the current strategies are in place in your organization? Say the last set was created. I'm not doing the Likert scale. I want you to actually pick a hard number because it's somewhat tougher to say a percentage. So 100% means all of the strategies in the last section were successful. They all did what they were intended. What do you think? Let's put some answers in there. You know, you would hope that the top choices are the popular ones. This looks like a reverse or a Pareto chart right now. It's the bottom turning out higher than the top. So we'll give you about 5 more seconds here. You can go ahead and close the poll. It'll pop up on your screen. Take a look at that. 50% to the bottom end. That should bother you. Only half the strategies actually showed benefit. I bet you the other ones worked all year long, too. Took up a lot of resources but showed no benefit. So here we're right now talking about a question you can ask your leadership about getting involved. How successful are they? What could we do to make them more successful? And a lot of it is treating them a bit like a DMAIC project. So if we can go back to the talk here. How do you, the individual, get involved in this process? Because I'm going to assume that you're a Lean Six Sigma or improvement practitioner. You are not a vice president, a president, or a C-level person in your corporation. So how do you get involved? Number one, you must show interest in the planning process. Not just execute it, but how did it go? And I think this is really key. People will involve you if you're interested. You will get involved to think there's a benefit to the organization. Now, this is not simple. It may not work the first time. You may have to work on these folks. But ask, how do they set the priorities? When were they set? How do you judge if a strategy is a success? How do you find out if I wanted to do an improvement project that my initiative would be related to a given strategy? What initiatives were created? Who's in charge of the strategy? And the last two are what personal. What can I do to support a strategy out there? How are they expected, the strategy that is, to hit the bottom line of the corporation? Now you start with your direct manager or supervisor and work upwards. There's open door policies in most every organization, but go find out. You'd be surprised how even very senior leaders would love to talk to you about this process and get inputs on it because they don't see the impact as much. Now here's what not to do. You can't have a to-do without a not to do. Well, like all things, don't tell them that they're wrong. Don't say you could do it better. My favorite, don't say I read a book on strategic planning and here's what you should do. Yeah, that's not good either. And the other one is, do not assume your leadership really likes their current process. You guys scored 50, 25, or I have no idea if my strategies are working. Do you realize they know how well the strategies are working? They talk about it, they deal with it. They are doing the best they can with what they know. But don't assume that they really like it. If you could give them a way to be 75% successful, I would expect they jump on it. The bottom one is also key. Do not assume that it is above your pay grade or your seniority, and you should not get involved. That one scared me for years in my early life as a process engineer and a black belt. They don't want to hear from me. I'm just a little guy. But I found as I was a master black belt in the last corporation that they welcomed outsiders talking to them if you were respectful and you really ask more questions like you would in a project and go, why? Use the 5 whys to understand what's going on. Lead them to wanting more. Now, the third part is you must volunteer to help. I find out, now this is job counseling more than Lean Six Sigma work, but people get promoted to positions that they've shown they can already do. Hardly everybody gets promoted to something that they don't already do. It's like if you wanted to be a supervisor, you volunteer to be your supervisor's stand-in every time they leave. If you want to do a leading teams, volunteer to be the assistant leader or lead everything you can. Pretty soon they'll get used to it and you'll have the position. So at some level you want to get involved with this. You just volunteer and start working with it. Ask them, what can I do? Can I work on a strategic plan? Can I be on one of the teams? Ask what the metric is. If they don't have one, can I help create one and track it for you? And the second part, everything you do in your Lean Six Sigma or whatever you call your improvement effort, attempt to link every project you do to an existing strategy. When you want to do a project, ask the leadership, which strategy for this year does this support? And I think just by showing the linkage, you will get involved in this process. And my little yellow box there, I guess it's not little, but one of the little phrases I keep in my mind when I'm working in an organization is your job to make your leaders look good. It's not to make yourself look good. The more you make your leadership succeed, the more they will understand you are part of it, and you will be a valued part of the organization. But again, try what you can to support the strategies. Give them metrics. If they have a metric, track it for them. Give it to your boss. Have insight. Work as if you should be on the team, and you can get there. I think in my last company, I followed these 3 steps, and I was in the next strategic planning meeting that came around after showing them that these weren't working. Did you want some help? Now, it works. You get the president of the corporation sitting there asking for help, but as long as you do it in a respectful, private way, it works out well. That's really the end of this topic right now. It's been about 40 minutes. But again, the purpose of this was to give you insight of how what you've learned as a Lean Six Sigma practitioner or any improvement practitioner can be used to drive business benefits outside of projects. It's in my personal view that if all the practitioners do is focus on projects, they will be surplus at the next reduction in force. Because if you've been in a program long enough, there's lots of projects at first, but after 3 to 5 years, there's not many projects. So they either cut people or let them go, but you're seen as just a project manager. But it's more than that. I know I ran my own, I guess, Lean Six Sigma program, and I had my black belts only running one project a year and had the rest of them doing stuff that we're going to be talking about in these seminars. It turns out that that's more valuable to the organization after the first couple rounds than anything there is out there. So here's what we covered today. Problem statements and strategies, how they are similar, and a little bit how they're different. Trying to see that those skills can be used for both. Tools that we have learned that can be used for strategic planning. A lot of those are the measure tools, the brainstorming, the creativity tools, but also when you think about risk assessments, FMEAs, hypothesis testing to judge success of different efforts, the whole idea of logic tree to look at each portion of the strategy, making sure they're completing the whole thing. And I hope I made a case for demonstrating why strategies without performance measures are not acceptable. That was really the purpose of the lecture. I'll share one anecdotal story that I was at a client earlier this year and looking at, they were trying to start up a Lean Six Sigma improvement program. We had a discussion about what are their business strategies. And we looked at their project list and looked at their business strategies, and I told I guess that he was a vice president for quality I was talking to. I said, how come none of these projects link to your yearly strategies? He goes, well, this is what we think we need to work on. So we had a long discussion about this whole topic. Why don't you treat these as part of your strategic plan? I'll admit they didn't listen well to it, and their program's struggling right now. They're fixing things that no one seems to care about. Wow, doesn't that happen? Looks like we haven't had any additional questions. Oh, wait, we have a question.
Okay, the question is, any new wisdom on limiting or expanding the number of strategies? Are organizational strategies trending towards driving more top-line or bottom-line growth?
Wow, more or less strategies. I'll tell you, generally I would treat the idea of the number of strategies as you would black belt projects. They're a function of the resources and the time you're willing to expend. So I find companies love the idea of 3 to 5 strategies. And we have a psychologist that speaks to our master black belt classes. He said people love lists of 3. It's just shown through a lot of research. So generally I see 3 to 5 strategies are what a company takes for a year. Now the question of top line or bottom line growth, I almost want to take a pass on either of your choices you're making me make. I find a majority of our strategies that I see in the companies I consult with are neither driven to move top or bottom line. They have generally in their meetings decided that that's the goal, but it's not spoken. When the strategy comes out, it says expand sales in this area. It says to grow the customer base. It says to increase capacity by 10%. They seem to forget that by the time the strategy makes it out to the public, they haven't linked it to overall business performance, or what I would call the satellite metric performance in the financials. You have to almost infer it. I find in the current environment since the U.S. recession or the worldwide recession started, more people are looking at strategies that I would call more survival, which really is cash flow based as much as anything. Again, not one of the choices, because they need to keep the business operating. And it's not as much growth as it's an avoidance of a loss in business. I am seeing some of our clients now starting to look at margin-based strategies again, instead of just keeping sales and revenue up. But most of them lately have been revenue-based or cash flow-based. I guess that's it for our questions. I thank you very much. If you do have questions, you will get contact information from Smarter Solutions. Even if you are watching this recorded, feel free to email in a question if you have one. You should have all the information. You can just hit a reply back to some of the emails you get from us. Again, there'll be an exit survey. We appreciate it if you would take the time to fill it out. And again, you can mark questions on it and decide if you want to get back. Oh, here's my question slide. Now, for participation in this whole series, you have an opportunity to purchase the book series. There's a 40% off. There's a coupon code. You find it from our website and our store. Again, Volume 2 is the one we dealt with in this. That's the enterprise side. Volume 3 is about 3 inches thick, and it's a whole series of tools on running improvement projects, starting from the define phase, creativity tools, all the way to the end of a wonderful control phase discussion. And the blue one on the screen is a system. It's called the Integrated Enterprise Excellence System. It's a little thin paperback, about 200 pages. It talks about an overview of how you can use the DMAIC tools and manage in a business improvement system. It's meant for an executive level. It's not a how-to book like the Volume 2 book is. But again, it's interesting if you want to get them. Appreciate the survey at the end. Appreciate you paying attention. You will be hearing from me in about 2 weeks. We'll have another webinar. Looking forward to it. There's our website. And again, I am Rick Haynes. I am rick.h@smartersolutions.com. Thank you, everybody.